I guess we might as well get started. So I'm Roger Rail. I'm chair of Scioto Residents for Safe Water and also chair of CARC. I've been involved, this is my 24th year being involved in this as a citizen volunteer. And I try to gather all the facts together so that all stakeholders can understand what's really going on. So I'll be showing this latest Google Earth mashup using the 2017 data later on in the program.
I'm Shonda Milkey, Ann Arbor resident, and I'm secretary for CARD.
I'm Kathy Knoll, Scioto Township trustee.
Michael Klotz, Congresswoman Dingell's Deputy District Director.
Katie Jositis, I work for Congresswoman Dingle as well.
Mitch Edelman with the Department of Environmental Quality's Remediation and Redevelopment Division.
Gerald Karen, I'm Jackson District Supervisor for Michigan Department of Environmental Quality and Remediation and Redevelopment Division.
You should probably be at the table.
I'll make it over there someday.
I'm Kathy Shirey. I'm also with DEQ. I'm the Director of Remediation and Redevelopment Division.
I'm Sarah Nedrich. I'm also with the DEQ RRD, and I'm the new District Enforcement Coordinator for Jackson District.
I'm Michael Moran. I'm Ann Arbor Township Supervisor, CARD Vice Chair, and following this for 15 of the 16 years I've been Supervisor.
So Kevin Thompson, Pittsfield Township resident.
Max Pettibone, Pittsfield resident also.
I'm David Neal, Scioto Township resident and Secretary Treasurer for Scioto Residents for Safe Water. I've been involved for, I think, 28 years.
I'm Christine Schweikofer. I'm the Environmental Health Director with Washtenaw County Health Department.
Jennifer Kahn, the Environmental Analyst for Washtenaw County Environmental Health.
I'm Kathleen McDonald. I'm an Environmental Engineer at the University of Michigan.
In the words of Homer, I'm no man. I'm Bryce Kelly from Scioto Township.
All right.
On the phone.
Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you, Mitch.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan Hamill. I'm the project manager for the Gelman site for the DEQ Jackson District.
All right, that's everybody so far.
So the next item on the agenda is the minutes from our previous meeting, which the board is going to vote on. So I move that we approve the minutes from the January meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you.
Is there a sign-in sheet?
There is a sign-in sheet, yeah, so if it can make its way around again, that would be great.
We just introduced ourselves, so you can chime in.
Jeff Ainer, concerned resident of Ann Arbor.
All right, so updates from the DEQ. Are you going to be doing that?
Yeah, I'm going to handle that. Yeah, Roger, I'm going to handle that. I'm going to kind of summarize what we've done in last quarter, part of 2017. This will be the same information that'll be generated, and I'll put it on the quarterly report that'll be posted here probably by the end of February. And it'll be that same information that'll be the quarterly report. It'll be the same report that we submit to the EPA in February here. So, just in the activities that have gone on, the residential well sampling for 2018 is planned. There'll be 104 wells sampled. Jenny, Washtenaw County has tentatively scheduled those to start in March as weather permits. Like I said, there'll be 104 wells. Kind of a little extra. The wells will include some wells on Christine Drive, Lakeview Drive, and Rose Drive. And we've sampled these in the past. Christine was done in 2014. Lakeview was done a couple of years ago in 2016. Rose Drive in 2016. So see, these are some of the locations that we have identified as being sampled every other year. I will have, by the time we start getting samples back in, I'll have the 2014 and 2016 addresses or sample locations in my database. I'm working on that. So so I'll be able to slip the new data in, and you'll have current from 2014. You have current data for all the addresses that we're going to be doing this year. And as far as monitoring well sampling, I will just to let you know, Gelman sampled and we received data for approximately 271 monitoring wells, September through December. They sampled anywhere from 24 wells, for example, in December, up to 116 monitoring wells in October. They're following the approved monitoring plans. I spot checked them, and there may not be, some wells may be missed in a month. For example, in December there were some weather issues, but they will be sampled as appropriate at the next available time. And this quarter, the last quarter, I did split samples with them at 2 locations, like I try to do on a quarterly basis. I split samples with them at some locations. This in December was at monitoring well MW112S and 112I. That data has been posted on the webpage. The December sampling is from DEQ is not on the webpage. We're getting caught up on postings to the webpage, so bear with us. They will be updated shortly. That will be put on. Just additional information that I will have in a quarterly report. From September through December, Gelman pumped and treated approximately 79.1 million gallons of contaminated groundwater from extraction wells across the site. They pumped on a monthly basis out of anywhere from 9 to 13 extraction wells were operated, in the individual month. I will have which months had which, number of wells and the volume pumped per that month on my report too. They also, during that time period, completed upgrades on the pumping communication system, maintenance, and upgrades to the treatment system, wiring, plumbing, chemical lines, air lines, and the compressor shed. I went down and inspected the activities on December 6th and confirmed that what they had said they were going to be doing they had told us that they would be shutting down the system during selected times during that time period, that they were completing the activities that they have said they would be doing related to the shutdown of the system. As far as surface water and seep sampling, from September through December, we collected samples out of Allen Creek, Third Sister Lake, the Smith Pond, Little Lake, several locations along the unnamed tributary of Honey Creek at Jackson Road, at Park Road, and we also collected right at the outfall in the unnamed tributary, and then along Dexter Road. We also sampled another pond that is north, that's on the eastern side within the PZ. It's the Arbor Landing Pond. It's where the Arbor Landing apartments are. We went ahead and just took a grab sample from that surface water body too. As far as the results, they range from non-detect to the highest concentration that we received, that we identified in our sampling, was at 4.4 parts per billion in December from the Allen Creek drain right there at the park there, West Park. The other sampling locations, like I say, range from non-detect to 3 parts per billion, 3.4 parts per billion. We will continue this sampling activities in 2018. We will be sampling the same locations at several times during the year, including Allen Creek again. So we have started that implemented that surface water sampling, sampling of surface waters. We will continue that in 2018. So we will have continue to generate data on surface waters in and around the site vicinity. As far as investigations, we have been getting questions about the investigation or the additional site investigation, soil sampling, groundwater sampling, that Gelman has voluntarily conducted since last year. We have not received a report. They are still summarizing and evaluating the information. We have expecting a report when that task is completed from them. What we want is not just raw data. We want it in a report and with their interpretations and evaluations on the data of the samples on their property. As far as additional activities the DEQ did, we did attend and provide information and answer questions at 7 local meetings during that time frame, September through December. You know about the card meetings, but we also I also attended the Scioto Township review of a pump station site plan review. The Gelman had wanted to upgrade a pump station there, so I attended that at the invite of Bryce. And we also had the stakeholder roundtable meeting. Scioto Township hosted it. That was in September. We also attended the EPA preliminary assessment review meeting back in November when the EPA came in and gave an update on their evaluation and the preliminary assessment activities. So that we attended, like I said, 7, and we'll continue to attend that. I will be putting this information, like I said, in the format of our quarterly report. That'll be posted on the web page here, but that'll be the same report that I will send to the EPA as requested by them. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Dan, did you say that you've gotten some soil samples from the company from their investigations over the last year and a half?
No, I said that they are still compiling that information. There have been several questions at meetings about on-site activities that Gelman had applied for and got permits from local authorities to do some borings and sampling. We have not seen a report on that. I'm just updating you that we have questions. We are continuing to identify that we need that information, and we expect to get that after they complete they compile all the information, they look at it, evaluate it, and then present it in a format of a report with those evaluations and discussions.
Are you going to get all of the data? I mean, why is it taking so long?
I can't answer that, Roger.
Did you ask them why it was taking so long?
They basically have said that they are compiling and evaluating that before they're going to release bits and pieces of the information.
They're going to release bits and pieces of the information.
No, they are not.
Well,
they're getting everything that they have the whole picture, not release it.
Well, they don't want to release it piecemeal. That's what you're saying. Okay, that sounds better.
I'm sorry if you misunderstood me.
Hey, Roger, I have a question. Hey, Dan, it's Bryce. Any anomalies or any significant results in any of the tests that you just described in all the wells from the last quarter of last year?
The monitoring well?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are the surprises?
No big anomalies where something was a very big surprise. We have, I keep my eye on some trends, of monitoring wells. We have, we have noticed that there have been some upward trends in the prohibition in the PZ area to the west, to the east of Maple Road, to the northeast. But we're keeping an eye on that. That we anticipate that we will be looking at that. We will anticipate that that information or additional investigations will be, we will request as needed if those trends continue. But nothing that jumped out in a real surprise.
Okay, thank you.
On a month, on a month or two basis.
All right, thanks, Dan.
What about the
I
surface?
don't have a map in front of me, or I can tell you what well. I had left all that stuff at the office, and since I'm home, I can't get it out and tell you where the trends are.
So what about our surface water results, Dan? Any surprises there?
No, the surface water results, as far as the creeks and ponds, the streams and ponds, they were within the range that we had detected concentrations of dioxane. There was no large increases. This is the first time. This is the first time we sampled Allen Creek in the West Park area. So this is the baseline data. We had sampled Allen Creek, if you want to say to the west of that, near Glendale, and it was non-detect earlier in the year. So I didn't feel that there was any big surprises. They were within the range that I was expecting if we encountered positive detection.
So, did you geocode those locations in your data?
Yes, Roger. I believe that should be all in the database. The XY coordinates should be there. I will double check that to make sure. If you find something that that coordinate is not there, let me know. We'll get it on.
Because you're using Michigan coordinate system, and when I plotted on Google Earth, I needed in latitude, longitude, so I have to convert that by hand.
Well, in reality, truthfully, we convert it the other way. So what I can do is give you both, between us. I'll try to get you that information because I look at, try to get it as X, Y, as latitude, longitude, and then I convert it. Kevin and I convert it so to match up what the X, Y that Gelman uses on their grid.
Yeah. And speaking of Kevin and what you mentioned earlier about doing more geocoding on the existing, all of the sample locations. Kevin did a preliminary mock-up of that using Rockworks. So you should be able to get all of those prior sampling locations that he has compiled from that Rockworks export. So you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel on that one.
Okay. The surface water, I'm not sure he had done the surface waters in Rockworks.
No, you might have to do that.
We worked together to get the coordinates, and the surface water location should be in the, I believe I've updated them all in the database.
Yeah. Did you find any coordinates that looked funny, that were off?
No, other than operator error. I'm not very good at it.
No, I mean in terms of
my conversion. But no, I did not notice anything. Do you have something in mind? Something that you're...
Yeah, there's two wells that Gelman shows as being on the Saginaw Forest property that are not on the Saginaw Forest property. They're really on their own parcel.
Well, if you send me which ones you have questions, you may have already done that, Roger. I realize in the emails.
There's a few others like that too. Yeah, I mean that's just
if you
stuff.
refresh my memory, I'll take a look at it.
And I'm still waiting for the data to be released from the U of M. U of M said that they will share the sampling data that they get from the company and their own sampling they do in Saginaw Forest. I want to see that.
Right, I have not received anything from U of M also, just to let you know.
Yeah, they're also a bit behind on their schedule to release that. So I did get some sampling data from the Northwest Supply Well from Matt Mott.
I got that same data, yes.
Yeah, so that's something that would be useful to incorporate. Now, again, my goal is to get all of the available data in one database. And since the company's not doing it, and since the DEQ doesn't have the wherewithal to make the company do it, we're just going to have to do it. Just have to do it ourselves.
And we've got somebody from U of M here, so.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a comment on the samples that U of M collects for our own records. So this isn't any regulatory sampling that we're doing. We're collecting it for our own records, just to keep an eye and an ear on what's going on our own property. Sometimes we split samples with Paul, sometimes we don't, but just so you know, when we're sharing that information with you, you know, if there's differences in terms of how we sample or what methods we use in terms of detection limits. Like I said, this isn't for regulatory sampling, so just keep that in mind.
Well, that can be made clear, you know, as a comment. If you use the same, if we have similar formats that we can parse and into the standard format that we've been using, then that'll be clear in the raw data.
And what two wells are you talking about on Saginaw Forest property?
That appear to be on Saginaw Forest property?
Mm-hmm.
TW10 and MW22.
So we had a conversation with Farsad, and they said that they checked that their survey and that those wells are not supposed to be on U of M property. Those are on PLS property.
Yeah, that's where they're supposed to be.
Right.
But their data, in the same data the DEQ has, shows it as being on U of M property. So I don't know where he's getting the data that he's telling you about.
He said from a survey, but that's what we got from Farsad.
So you should ask him about that, because we can't seem to get information from him, so maybe you can. Because that's, you know.
So is it showing up as on their property, Roger, or as in the Saginaw Forest area?
No, it's on their property. If you look at the boundary here, and I probably have a layer that shows that somewhere. But basically, here's the property line. It'll like go right along here, where these are on Gelman property, and everything west of that is on Saginaw Forest. And these are the ones. These are the data that. You know, maybe there's a conversion problem between Michigan coordinate system and latitude, longitude, but you know, check it out. It looks like these are on Saginaw Forest property. Well, it's clear they can't be, because aren't they building a fence around this, their own property? Are they gonna have a fence on this back line here, do you know? Back of their...
I don't know. Dan, do you know that?
No, I don't know for sure. I know they have fencing around a good portion of their property. I don't know where you're pointing to, Roger, whether
it's on the west side of the remaining parcel.
Yeah, that is open back there. I don't know if they're planning on putting any fencing there.
Okay.
Are there wells on the forest property?
Yes.
There are?
Yes, we have quite a few wells on our property.
Are those yours, or are those ones that were drilled?
These are not our wells. These are Paul's wells.
Well, except for the caretaker's wells.
Yes, we have caretaker.
These wells here, and only the original caretaker well is still used for sampling, as is the replacement. The third caretaker well never got used, so that one's, I think, plugged.
And
the current caretaker well is way down here by Liberty.
We have the caretaker wells?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how deep those are.
Say again, what was the question?
How deep are they?
Well, if you open it up in Google Earth, you get to see all that. That one's 216 feet deep. This one's 62. That was
78. That's
78.
That's not.
There's a number. Now this one's had discrepancies because I think it's been replaced. There's some data that shows that there was a shallower cabin, caretaker cabin 1, but this one might have been a replacement well. It's up to 132 feet deep.
Okay. That's good.
Are you interested in getting coordinates for W22 and TW10? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'd like to see that plotted in the right location.
Good, thank you.
I mean, reality matters.
Are you running for office? Never mind.
No, I can't afford that.
That's not the right slogan.
All right, so let's see, I have another question for you, Dan.
Yes.
Somewhere here. Oh, the corrections, I sent you some corrections on the data.
Yeah, Roger, I corrected I had inadvertently put that extra line in at Allen Creek. The title I had not.
I don't need an explanation, I just want to make sure you got my emails on that.
I got the correction. Now, what I did not do was some of the additional rework of the database. You had taken out the vertical profiling on the what's the TW14 or
Right.
whatever. I have not removed that yet. So, but I did remove the extra Allen Creek sample that was in the was on the
Was a
data
duplicate, right?
table, but not not showing up on the the plot or the when you look for data. I took that out because I put it in and wrong and then corrected it and then forgot to take the old one.
Yeah, well, TW14, what happened there is the company included data as if those samples were taken from the screened area, and of course those data were taken during the drilling of TW14. Now, interestingly enough, the 2010-11 database, the new database the company briefly let us have access to, had already removed that, but it persisted in your database. And
yeah, I didn't. When I inherited what we had, Roger, I get added to. Now I've made some similar to you. I've made some corrections to the name, some of the road names, and I'll continue to do that where it's where
they're inconsistent.
Sometimes it's called Dexter, sometimes it's Dexter Road. I'll make it all uniform.
Yeah.
But,
as we go forward, that's going to be more important because as new monitoring areas pop up, data from different data sets is hard to match up because of the differences in the names. And I've got a display.
Yeah,
that
that's
shows the magnitude of
kind of secondary for me. I go in and correct or do that type of work, but it's a full. It's over. Kind of some days overwhelming just to get the data in there. I want to make sure people can punch out some the monitoring well data, keep that up to date, and some of these other corrections will be.
But like right now, you cannot match up the Gelman database with the DEQ's own sampling around the site. You have to do that by hand. You can't take the several thousand readings that have been made over the years by the Michigan Department of Health and then the DNR, and as they got incorporated into the DEQ. You can't match those data up because the identifiers are different. The street names are different.
Yep.
So that's a lot of handwork for you to do, where if we have a conversion, okay, here's the database, here's the names in this database, look it up on this standard list of names, and then plug it in that way. And that's certainly feasible to do that, and I've done a preliminary version of that. And by the end of the year, I'd like to see all that historical data included, because there's a lot of it, and it's fools. It would be wrong to throw that data away and not consider it, because as the cleanup winds down in future decades, nature's going to revert back to whatever conditions happened early on. And we have a lot of samples early on to show what the conditions were. May not be enough samples, but it's a lot more than we show in the current database. And as conditions revert back to, quote, normal, of course we have to consider in the decades, we're going to see climate change effects. We've already seen more rainfall and stuff like that. To handle this site for the coming many decades, we really need to incorporate all the original data that we can. Because there's a lot, if you ignore that, then you're gonna, it's just like ignoring what happened to allow this contamination to happen in the first place. So that's my opinion on that. And, you know, getting the data together is a one-time thing, and that it's there for people, all stakeholders to use and consider. And I'm gonna be showing some graphics on that here for people in the room. Any other updates you got? Oh, I know.
No, that was it. That was it as far as what has been done in the last half of 2017.
Right. I have one more, and I noticed that the EPA has asked you to consider to determine if there are any PFAS, any PFAS on the Gelman site.
Well, I can probably jump in.
Yeah, Mitch is going to jump in.
You want me to go for that one, Dan?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so for those that don't know what PFAS are, that's an acronym for perfluoroalkylated substances, which is a whole list of, 20 plus different chemicals that are in things like Scotchgard and Teflon and all kinds of stuff. We would call it an emerging contaminant, and it's definitely got a lot of concern on the part of the state. The governor's established a team working on it that Kathy has a lot of, she participates on as a technical advisor. EPA's interested, so as it relates to Gelman, as Roger said, EPA's asked some questions about it, and independent of EPA, given our emerging knowledge or evolving knowledge about this suite of chemicals, we're being proactive about it too, and we got a statewide contract because there's some very specific protocols for sampling that are different than other volatile organic chemicals, and the detection limits and the health-based standards that the state recently promulgated, 2 health-based standards for 2 of the chemicals in that suite of polyfluoroalkylated substances, or PFAS, that total up to 70 parts per trillion. So that's orders of magnitude below the numbers that we've got for dioxane. So we've got a statewide contract who's got some expertise to sample this, and we've asked Gelman to undertake a records review to see if they've used any substances that may have contained the PFAS, I'm going to say it for short because it's a lot easier to say that. And yet, while they're doing that, we think it's prudent for the state to pull a couple samples, and we've got a strategy that we're following where we want to start at a couple of monitor wells that we know to be high in 1,4-dioxane. The idea being, if we sample these for the PFAS and find them co-located, we think that's a pretty good line of evidence that it may be a contaminant of concern from Gelman.
That those sampling, those monitoring wells we're considering are on the property. I just wanted to put that
Right,
in.
so near the source of release. And we aren't going to wait for Gelman to finish their records review before we undertake that process. So Dan and Jerry and I hope to be able to have some to report back to the CARD by the May meeting with results, or at least an estimate of when we're going to have results for that. And you know, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be an interesting challenge for us because these things we're finding they're ubiquitous in the environment because of the widespread nature of their use and manufacture. We know that there can be airborne deposition. It's been found in some municipal water supplies, Ann Arbor's being one of them, at very low single parts per trillion or thereabouts concentrations. So attributing these to a source can be a challenge. So that's why we think it makes sense for us to start out at a couple wells that we know are high for 1,4-dioxane, which we know is attributable to Gelman in the vicinity of the plant where they released it. And if we see high concentrations there, we think it's a good line of evidence that it could be a contaminant of concern here. On the other hand, if it's non-detect, it's another good line of evidence that we don't think it's a contaminant of concern here. One of the challenges is going to be if we see it at somewhere between 1 or 2 parts per billion up to 60 or trillion, thank you, Kathy. 1 or 2 parts per trillion versus
If we see
70.
2 parts per billion, we'll be doing something really fast.
Yes, because for those non-scientists in the room, 1 part per billion is 1,000 parts per trillion. And again, we've got a 70 part per trillion newly promulgated state generic cleanup criterion for unrestricted residential use of 70 for a combination of two of these different chemicals.
In groundwater.
In groundwater.
All right. So a little background for everybody that's not familiar with this. This is basically the Rockford, north of Grand Rapids, Wolverine site that made hush puppies and disposed of a lot of their waste on.
Oscoda Air Base as
Yeah,
well.
Oscoda Air Base.
Oscoda, Alpena,
I was gonna say,
Grayling.
If anybody wants to talk about other places in the state, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like you said, it's an emerging contaminant, and the reason it's bad is because, unlike dioxin, if the body breaks down, maybe 85% of it, I guess this accumulates because it can be 100 times more in your blood if it's, like if it's 1 part per trillion in the water, it can be 70 parts per trillion in your blood.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's an upper limit on that, but that's kind of disturbing.
I have been told that I think it's 98% of us probably have PFAS in our blood.
Right.
In some level or other.
This is the page from the Ann Arbor, City of Ann Arbor site.
Teflon, Gore-Tex, all sorts of consumer
And this is
products.
kind of important. The raw water supplies and finished water are very low on the average of 8 to 15 parts per trillion. You're saying single parts per trillion. You mean single digit parts per trillion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is double digits parts per trillion.
Right.
So does that mean this is going to be an action site?
Well, I guess it all depends on how you define action site. I mean, certainly, I know the city's interested. We think it's prudent to look and see whether it's a contaminant of concern from Gelman. Kathy can outline statewide efforts.
There will be actually, and we're getting together the contract right now, a statewide effort to be resampling all public water supplies in the state, and certainly Ann Arbor will be among them. There's also a surface water quality monitoring program that has been in effect for a couple of years, but now has funding so they can amp the efforts considerably, and we'll be taking all of that information together to look at whether we can tell if these things are simply ubiquitous, man-made but kind of non-point source contamination, or if in fact we're looking at sources that should be dealt with. With the water supply stuff, not the water supply, but the ambient water quality and surface water quality monitoring, for example, we've found already one plater in the Lapeer area that was having discharges, and we're working with them just to find other products for them to use and eliminate their use of it. So that's the action we're taking there. At places like Wordsmith and Wolverine, we're actively looking at water supply replacements and I hope remediation at some point. So it depends a lot on what the situation is going to be. These are very low levels as compared to the ones where we've identified real sources.
Mm-hmm. And other potential sources, Jenny mentioned the Air Force Base up in Oscoda. These PFAS are really prevalent in the firefighting foam, and at the Air Force, they did a lot of fire training to manage, be prepared if there were any aircraft crashes. So we see those at many military installations where they did the training with the firefighting foam. AFFF is what they call it. Yes. And so that can be a source. Another thing we're learning about, and Kathy mentioned the plating, the use of this PFAS in plating. So does everybody know here what biosolids are?
What's plating?
Plating?
Yeah.
Plating.
Oh, okay.
It's, in fact, it turns out to be, so far, that we've found kind of specifically decorative chrome plating, just as a little point of
On
trivia.
plastics.
Yes.
On plastics.
On plastics.
So, in wastewater treatment, whether it's from an industrial process, from a plating operation, or in municipal wastewater, there's biosolids, which are the precipitate of the wastewater treatment process, and some of the biosolids have nutrient values, so they're applied on land in certain cases under permit. And so we're seeing in some of our early research that there can be high enough concentration, when we're talking about in the parts per trillion level, that it's detectable in the biosolids, and then that could then potentially leach from the biosolids into the soils and eventually make its way into groundwater. So this is, we're on the cusp, learning edge of understanding how widespread these are.
So part of the suspected pathway is from soils to groundwater.
Yes.
So are you starting with the soils at the Gelman site?
No. We're
We're
going to
starting
go
with the groundwater
to
right now.
a couple specific monitor wells. Dan mentioned which ones those are.
But you know, if it was, if they did use this at the Gelman site, where would you look first?
Well, we're going to look in the monitor wells.
Yeah, we have actually, in most cases, been looking at residential wells, which isn't
Yeah, but
necessarily
by the time it
the
gets
best
to
place.
wells, it's already,
If they've used it, it's been there for a long time.
but if you're going to look in soils, where would you look first at the Gelman site, based on history?
Well, we look in, areas where we knew they discharged, and yet
And that would
we think
where the
it's-
highest concentrations were of other things in the soils. That would be, I'm trying to lead you on here.
I will also tell you there's not a recognized good method for analyzing PFAS in soils at this point. EPA is working on that, but we have a good deal more confidence in the lab methods for water.
Okay, that's a good reason not to look at the soils. But if you were going to look at soils,
Oh, we'll be looking at them anyway if we find
look
it in
at
the
the
water,
burn
but
pit. Look at the burn pit. They threw everything into the burn pit. If you look at your early sampling results, there are all kinds of stuff in the burn pit. Now, how mobile is PFAS?
Very.
Very.
Is it 100% miscible like dioxane? And is it persistent?
Yes.
So it's another nasty thing like dioxane.
Yes.
So
Probably
we
even
need
more
to
so.
understand
more widely
how
used.
Yeah.
we need to understand how persistent, fully miscible compounds move from soil to groundwater and through groundwater. We need to understand that better.
And in
Would you
fact,
agree?
Yes.
I was in Cincinnati at EPA's Water Research Lab on Friday, and PFAS, because we're not the only state who is dealing with this, this was a Region 5 and surrounding states, as well as the Office of
Right.
Research and Development meeting. PFAS was a large portion of our afternoon's agenda, and we are asking EPA to undertake some of that kind of research, because we
If
all agree
only
we
there
need
was
that
another
information.
compound that was similar, that we have a lot of data for, that's going to persist for many decades, that we could study, that's not complicated by a lot of other compounds.
So are you
If
saying
only
you don't
had a
think we
site
should
like
sample
that
these wells
somewhere
for
in the world
PFAS? Is that what you're saying,
that we could use as a study site to help the tens of thousands of these other dioxane and 1,4 and PFAS sites.
So we think it's, a prudent approach for us, even before Gelman completes their research, to look at a couple known spots with high dioxane concentrations to see whether there's any corresponding concentrations.
Yeah, and
of
perhaps
PFAS.
you're right, Roger, if we do find there's some corresponding trends information with the PFAS, maybe we can use the dioxane as a tracer, or as, some
Well,
correlation.
we already have a
We'll see.
site that has enough variability over 3 decades of data that would help people understand how problems like this spread and how to clean them up. If only we use it if we have this opportunity and we're not taking advantage of it, I mean, you're not gonna wait for a big PFAS site the size of the Gelman site.
I have a couple, sadly.
What's the treatment mechanism or remediation for PFAS?
Great question. I know carbon can be one of the useful techniques. Kathy and Jerry might be in a better, have more information
My
on that
understanding is
stuff.
that's the number one way to treat it is with
It
carbon.
is.
Granular activated carbon.
And certainly source removal is an option, and one, if we have a defined source that, yeah, absolutely, we'd like to look at. Because it is so highly soluble, it does appear that it moves very quickly into the groundwater, so removing the soil source, if it's still left, is great, but you've still got the groundwater to deal with. It's not quite as nice and easy as, remove the source and the groundwater cleans itself up.
Who issues permits now for agricultural application of biosolids?
That's the Water Resources Division of the DEQ.
Okay. And are they tuned into this
Oh, yes.
issue? Okay.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Our work group comprises every division of the DEQ, and then at the state level, DHHS and the Agriculture Department and Veterans Affairs are the primary players.
I know
as well as
that
the governor's office.
Yeah, I know that there are several larger farms in Ann Arbor Township that do apply biosolids, so I'm just trying to understand testing mechanism, and are they being tested at this time with whatever poor method is currently available, to
We have
determine
not
the
started
presence?
an overall biosolids testing program yet. We've just done a pilot, one or two, and we have found it when we already know there's a source coming in.
Is there
I'm not
any-
sure, there are plans to systematically go through and start looking, but I think they're working on the surface water and fish first.
Okay, I'll check with Evan, but are there any informational attempts working with farmers who come in asking for permits for biosolid application?
Not that
About
I'm
this being a
aware
problem?
of yet. But I do know biosolids are very high on the list. We're actually one of the few states that has that program. For the most part, those are federal permits. And we are asking EPA to look into setting a federal standard. They're not real excited about the idea, but we are asking them to do that.
And so another thing for all of us to think about as potential sources is septic systems. They not only do septic systems have biosolids that need to be occasionally emptied and managed properly. The consumer materials that we use that contain these PFAS can be and are present in some septic systems. Remember I mentioned earlier this protocol for sampling. It includes the fact that the sampling team cannot be wearing clothes that are treated for Gore-Tex, like Kathy mentioned. Can't have used fabric softener, dryer sheets because of the
Cross contamination.
yeah, the fabric sheets can have the PFAS in them, and that can transfer when you're talking about parts per trillion detection limits. So it stands to reason.
They had fast food wrappers, for like 3 days beforehand.
So it stands to
This stuff
reason.
makes things grease-proof, waterproof. It's in an astounding number of consumer products.
So septic systems can be and likely are a source. So then we're going to be, as we get into this further, we're going to be evaluating relative concentration of these sources because if somebody uses PFAS in a manufacturing process, I would expect higher concentrations near the source of disposal than a dilute form like a septic system, but it doesn't. And when you're talking about parts per trillion detection limits, you're going to see this stuff.
Couple questions. You say you're going to test at the existing monitoring wells on the Gelman site. Like, why did you pick those?
Dan, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, they are on the property. They are higher concentration. They will be different elevations, different depths below ground. So we since this is a snapshot, our first attempt to see if there is any correlation, any lines of evidence that this could be a contaminant of a concern there, that's how we chose the wells. I don't have the list in front of me. NW5 is on that location, and but we're going to try to do a handful, probably 5 to 10 range with different elevations and different concentrations of dioxane that is known to be attributed, it's on their property and it's from the release of dioxane. The idea that Mitch mentioned earlier, that if you have positive detections in those wells, then it is a line of evidence that any PFAS identified there, that it could be a contaminant that was released at the actual Gelman site.
Is there a correlation with this chemical and dioxane or other chemicals?
Not that
So that's what why we asked them to do a record search to see what in their process was there any use of chemicals that would be associated with the PFAS chemicals, and it could be. They're talking about organic. Making filters with organic chemicals. We've asked them to do that. They will collect that information. We'll use that as a line of evidence too. But with the being such an emerging contaminant, potential emerging contaminant, with it being such a toxic contaminant, low PPT levels for exposure. We wanted to at least start gathering some information to see if we have to ramp this thing up related to PFAS at the Gelman site.
See, real quick,
But be clear that, as Mitch said, it is in the environment so much that we're just gathering bits and pieces to as a start to see if it's related to Gelman. If we get some detections, then we still have work to do to see if that is an actual contaminant of concern related to release from the Gelman site.
It seems like it's less prevalent than dioxane. I mean, the PFAS is more prevalent than dioxane.
Yeah. Part of wanting to
in the environment,
In the environment.
Yeah, I agree with you there. If that's what you're stating, Roger. That
Your colleague wants to say something here.
Yeah, being as close to the potential source of dioxane as possible helps minimize the risk that some other PFAS source is there.
Okay.
So the idea is if we sample it and dioxane is very high and PFAS is very high, we're going to have a pretty good link that they used it. If we get just above detections and we still get high dioxane, then it might be more that it's in the system that the dioxane is adding to, and if we don't find it at all, then obviously we don't find it at all. And the results are going to help us direct what the next step would be to.
What the heck?
Warming up the vocals.
What's that noise?
That's me. I hit my key and it went on to my computer here. I wasn't, Gary. I wasn't trying to make fun of your.
It's not like you were saying whoopee. Thank you.
Rehearsing for the voice.
Yeah, I would never do that since you're my new supervisor.
I had one more question about this. You're talking about other potential sources such as septic systems. What about these on-site individual community wastewater treatment plants?
Sure. Anything that where there's wastewater disposal, and in some cases, like I said, airborne deposition can cause the stuff to fall into the ground, and then rain and snow happens and it washes it into the water, be it surface water or groundwater. It's ubiquitous, and, we're on the cutting edge of learning how widespread a problem it is and what the health effects are. The state was very proactive. EPA doesn't even have standards for this. They've got what they call a health advisory level for the same two. I would call them congeners, I think is the...
Analytes or congeners are the two terms I've heard most often.
of the different per and polyfluoroalkylated substances. So,
And the state is adhering to the EPA's number.
no, the state promulgated
A better number?
enforceable criteria now, Roger, under our,
At what risk and life exposure are you using for that?
well, it's probably the 32 years, isn't it? The 6 years of a child and 20.
Actually, we simply adopted the EPA 70 parts per trillion because when we looked at our risk-based analysis and we ran it through all of our calculations as we would do all of the other substances, we came out with 80-something. So we went with the slightly lower EPA value, feeling that their science was quite sound, and it had been fairly vetted and defended already.
And the EPA's is based on 1 in a million over 70 years?
I don't know that it's actually a cancer risk value or if it's an overall health advisory value, which adds some other issues in because this is there are multiple health effects on it.
No, it's an endocrine
Yeah.
disruptor, so it might not be a carcinogenic risk.
Right. I'm really not sure, not being a toxicologist, what it's based on.
And Rita's not here to tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure she does know, but and I can probably get that for you from our toxicologist. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I had an email late last night about this.
There's a lot of information actually out on EPA's website. They've got some really good fact sheets on PFAS.
Yeah, is there, and you have a link to that on your website or something?
I believe we do.
Yeah, and is there a list? You said there were a whole bunch of things, you know, fabric sheets, fast food wrappers.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a list of all the things that you compiled?
Some of those fact sheets do contain a lot of the consumer products and
So
discussion on what it
Because that'd be a
is.
good thing, I think, to share, so
Yeah.
people say, well, okay, you might want to find an alternative to these if you have a septic field.
Oh yeah, deodorant, a lot of other personal care
And that's the
products.
same with the accent.
Yes, it is. It's very similar in that way.
Should Roger pull up the MPART website so people
Yeah,
can take a quick
you can
look
go
and we can see
ahead.
what's on there?
Sure. Your MPART is, that one is fairly
So what are we
basic,
looking
but
at?
it's got some nice.
MPART?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it will be on that. What is it?
MPART?
It's an SOM site. Yeah, it's MPART. I don't know if it'll come up under that.
Michigan?
Yeah, try that one, Roger.
That is the first one. Yeah,
Taking action?
that's the one.
Google's so good.
Yep, there we go. In fact, that's Karen Vorse of our Grand Rapids office doing some sampling. We teased her a lot when that came out.
And she's still alive, so.
She is indeed. And there's our environmental health
Think of the
director
killing us.
there. And there are some other interviews with Dr. Savitz, whom the health department has hired to oversee some of this. There's a frequently asked question
Yeah,
up there. And then
scroll
we
up a
have some-
little bit, Roger, on this left side, PFAS and home filtration systems, safe fish guidelines, et cetera. So you've got-
And there's the EPA PFAS in the environment down there as well.
Okay. All right, well,
So yeah, there's some good stuff down
we'll
there.
share this.
There's also the larger sites each have an individual web page, and there were links to those as well.
Do you have a online map yet of all the sites?
I don't know that we do. ATSDR over there also has some good information.
For those of you not familiar with that, that's the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is part of the Centers for Disease Control, and our State Department of Health and Human Services and county public health folks.
Yeah, and that has
work
some
with
of the
them on
listings
public
of
health
products right
matters.
there.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Ken?
I just said that one has down here some of the, not brand names, but types of products that you'll find the stuff
Oh,
in.
here, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's hope that the federal agency doesn't get its budget cut.
For the DEQ and municipal stakeholders, I wondered if there's any news with the Supreme Court's denying Gelman's appeal about the interveners. Does this mean that something can start happening in court.
Means we get to sound the trumpets and be relatively irritable and obnoxious. But no, our next meeting is next month, so that'll be the first time since.
It means we're in it for the long haul
Right.
at this time.
Yeah, and the discussions between the state and the intervening parties and Gelman have been ongoing while that appeal process has worked its way through. So the fact that we don't have an inked consensus modified consent judgment yet isn't necessarily a function of the appeals process. There's other stuff going on, and that work continues.
Yeah, Mitch is right. Everything kept going. Nothing stopped.
So, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you have a follow-up, please.
Yeah, well, I just wonder, so what would make something happen as far as what's the holdup?
In terms of a deliverable, there's still some science to work through. There's still some making sure that we've got a good communication stream for the public, and then the fine detail just to the legal document. So there's more. I'm oversimplifying the process, but there's three components that SIL's actively engaged in. I'm sure the DEQ has got more. So yeah, it's a fairly I don't want to say broad. Well, it'll be a broad document.
So for those that may be new to this meeting, I apologize if this is going to be redundant to the people that have heard this before, but so we're involved in this confidential negotiation process with all the parties, strict confidentiality, so we can't say much about it. We understand how frustrating that is to residents who are not part of the intervening parties that participate in the meetings and have a better sense of what's going on. So I can't really disclose where we are. Sean, just know that we're continuing to work on this with the goal of getting to a modified consent judgment that incorporates the updated state drinking water cleanup criterion of 7.2, among other things. So we continue to work on that, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, but I can't give you a concrete deadline.
Okay, no, I don't want you to, violate any confidentiality, but I guess what I'm trying to understand, so there's the meetings that are ideally working towards a modified consent judgment. So is that more likely to happen during these meetings as opposed to in court, or is it that the DEQ and the interveners can't agree, and so that's why it's not in court right now?
Let me just give you a general overview. The actual, right now we're in settlement negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
So actual court action apart from that is not going on. Right now we're focused on settlement negotiations. And that's all. So there's no discovery.
I was going to ask, there's
Okay.
discovery.
No discovery, which means exchange of information of the parties during the preliminary phases of court actions. That hasn't happened. Complaints haven't been filed. So nothing like that has happened. We're in these confidential settlement negotiations.
Okay, and the next meeting is March?
And generally speaking, not necessarily related to this case, but generally speaking, I think it's safe to say that the state has found that negotiating with parties and striving to achieve mutually agreeable outcomes is oftentimes more preferable to going to court, because there's a much more uncertainty in terms of what can arise out of that process. So that's just a general observation that I have.
And I will put it more bluntly, we have experience with losing in court, so we tend to try and work something out that is, if not perfect, at least acceptable prior to letting some third-party IDA judge decide.
Although the notion of not conducting discovery just because you're having settlement negotiations is rather odd to me. I don't know why that would be the case. I think it's a very good one, but not participating, I'll just leave it there.
Shauna, the other thing though is that the work that the EPA and the DEQ, is relative to the petition is still a very important and viable track. So I know that the confidentiality around anything always brings about a feeling of suspicion or not sure, or there's no deliverable. So, but know that with the EPA, the EPA and the DEQ, there's a fair amount of contact communication between Chicago and Lansing and all of the parties. So that's an important track too. While the amended CJ is important, the fact that what EPA and DEQ are doing is extremely valuable. So in fact, sometimes one helps the other. One track helps the other track.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, definitely.
I saw in the news a couple weeks ago that there's some kind of legislative action underway in Lansing where they're trying to form some committee that's going to have some kind of ability to oversee the MDEQ. Is that something that's ongoing, and is that a concern, especially as it relates to us? Like, are they going to be able to quash all this, even all this work we put in and all these cleanup efforts and everything? Is that moving forward? Like, is there any legislative word on that?
I can take that one. There are 3 bills in. One would create an oversight committee for permit appeals. One creates an oversight committee for administrative rule promulgation, and one is an advisory committee to the governor.
That's the one that made the news, I think, was because they were concerned.
It's a package, all 3 of them, but it is 3 separate boards actually, and 3 separate bills. They have been voted out of the Senate. They are at the House. My understanding is, and we've been told not to worry, they'll be making changes to the House bills. I'm not sure exactly what the behind the scenes things are. DEQ does not formally have a position on the bills. We have submitted some questions, concerns to what was the Senate at the time, whomever's dealing with the legislation, the sponsors, and we're working with them. I don't see, I'll be honest, a huge amount of direct effect on a project like this one. Our biggest RRD's concerns certainly center on the rules advisory and the fact that we have a rules package in right now, and we do not know how this would affect that. This board, if this went through as written, would in fact have the authority to change a rule package. We have a lot of questions about how that would work, and if somebody sued over that, who would be picking up the cost of lawsuits, that kind of thing. The permit appeals board is also of great concern to most of the rest of DEQ, which is permits. Our division happens to be one of the very few that doesn't do that, so we have less direct involvement there. But again, there are a lot of concerns over the fact that these boards, if again this went through as written, have kind of absolute power to change decisions from the department.
Yeah, I mean, like if somebody came to DEQ for a wetlands permit and then it was issued for a good reason, and then they could appeal to this group, and they'd say, and the group would just issue this wetlands permit, right?
That is the way
Is that how I read it?
That's pretty much
It
how
doesn't
it's
seem so
written.
great.
Again, we don't have an official position on it, but we do have certainly concerns.
And yet we do know that
really
this
had
area
that.
has some pretty active legislators, so feel free to get some more information from them and see if they can be any further assistance to you as you learn about this.
Yeah, well, there's.
Yeah, and you know, we're happy to answer questions on like how would it affect this aspect or something.
You don't trust our corporate overlords?
I mean, I'm just looking for the right outcomes. If it's, I don't know what to think about that. I don't, of course, but.
Well, and one of the other pieces of interest and discussion regarding this bill is the makeup of the boards, because it is specified in the bills, and it's a fairly one-sided group.
Yeah, I think there was one spot for
something like that.
Anybody who wasn't corporate is what it looked like.
Yeah, this community knows that, well, in case you didn't know it, we are in the midst of a public comment period on our cleanup criteria rule revisions. It's the third public comment period since April of 2016, and we've been working on this rule package since at least 2010. So, and because of the pace that I just summarized, recall that the science that led to the now 7.2 part per billion drinking water criterion that we've adopted was a change in EPA's database in 2010 that really got finalized in 2013, and we were hoping to have a process to update our criteria sooner than that, but given the fact that we're still in a public comment period on a third package of rules, the department, with the governor's support, took the initiative, and we've now got a separate, we had a rule revision only for the drinking water number for 1,4-dioxane. That was after the year-long emergency rule period that resulted in that number.
So the vapor intrusion numbers is part of that new package?
Yeah, there's a proposed screening level for vapor intrusion for 1,4-dioxane at 1,900 parts per billion in the package. It's out for comment right now.
But if this new set of bills goes through, could that committee change any existing? Could they change the 7.2 back to 85 or 32?
You know, I'll be honest, I am not a legislative analyst and I haven't looked at it in that much detail, so I'm not sure at what point in a rules package they can change things. My understanding is it's more in the promulgation of rules that they have a role, as opposed to existing rules. But I also do know that it's silent on rules like our package that are in progress. So I would think that, yeah, if it passed tomorrow, there would be a chance that they could go in and change the rule package to whatever it is that they thought was appropriate.
And regarding the ongoing comment period, are you getting a lot of comments, Mitch?
Kathy's probably in a better position to.
We have not gotten a lot of comments that we didn't already have from the preceding rule packages.
Nothing startlingly new? Or
No, the only thing actually that is new-ish is because we did establish the PFAS criteria. People have realized that that particular provision, which allowed us to do that, is not included in the current rules package,
Right.
because it was part of the give and take of negotiations. So we do now have at least one comment in it that I know that I'm aware of that asks us to retain that ability.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think they're pretty much the same.
Well, we should move on if we hammered that enough.
Thank you.
What do we have done here for this? So, I put together, I got the update from Dan.
So just for, I think Dan, the call dropped, so Jenny's working on trying to get Dan back on somehow. I don't know if there's an issue with the phone.
She's checking because there was no dial tone, so I'm not sure.
Or if I should just call him on this and put him on the speaker so he can hear this.
At least hear this.
Let me do this. Figure out my technology. Hey Dan, it's Mitch. I'm going to put you on speaker on this. Jenny's having issues with the other phone, so Roger, we're just getting ready to move on to this next agenda item, so we can pass this around if you can't hear. Go ahead, Roger. See if Dan can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me, Dan?
Yes, I can, Roger.
Okay. So I got the 2017 data from the state, I think about January 31st, something like that. So I've been hammering away at creating my 2017 Google Earth mashup. As I mentioned earlier, there are some data issues. There was some old mistakes that I tried to correct. There's some old mistakes that I haven't corrected. If we go to the wells database, there's a lot of available information that's in hard copy form that's not in the database. A lot of it's location data, there's some well log data stuff, and what I do is I go through and I highlight those fields in the well database so that maybe some point somebody at the state will fill that data in or require the company to do that. Since the company must have it, it appears on reports that they've submitted, either in table form or in map or cross-section form. So we know they have this data. It's just not in the official database, so we'd like to get that. But that being said, we can still create a Google Earth mashup from the remaining existing data. And you won't see too much different in the what this looks like, except that I went ahead and added the marshy area and extruded that up. And that's something I hadn't been doing because their marshy area maps are discontinuous. Here's the marshy area here. This looks like a glove. Well, they just end right here. So we don't know where these 6,000 parts per billion are over here. Where that's going. Is it coming from there? Is it going somewhere? So in the past, I didn't feel comfortable plotting this because it looked like it was so incomplete. But in the last year, they've done more details. You can see there's more contours here on this latest map. So this seems to be better. But if we extrude that up, then it shows there's really high concentration still. In fact, let me just separate that one up from all the others. And this is the kind of thing, once I have this posted, you can download it and do your own investigation of this. So this is what that marshy area looks like. Pan back a little bit to see the top of it. Yeah, so there's a lot of dioxane left there. And of course there's even more than that because it was discontinuous here to the east. So it'd be nice if that was corrected sometime. When they do a plume map, they should do the whole plume, not just half the plume. That's my understanding. That's what I'd like to see. But if we pan back and look at the whole thing, so that marshy area is a pretty big portion of the volume of dioxane. So there's some areas where there's increasing concentrations, and what I've done as part of that is show where the wells have had their maximum readings per well per year. So we start out back in 1985. These were the maximum. And again, the plume map doesn't correspond to what the plume looked like in 85. I haven't synced up those plumes. So this is still the 2017 plume map. But if we bring this forward, you can see, in fact, let me just play it here. Through the years, you can see these are the highest concentrations for each well per year. So where do you think the dioxane is going based on available samples? let's bring it all the way up to 2017, it was cycling there, so. And in fact, let's go back a couple of years. So this is probably from like 2015 to 2017. So those white circles, donuts, are showing where the highest concentrations per well. So that's where dioxane is continuing to go up. So would you say that most of that's moving east, or northeast, or north, or northwest?
It kind of looked like it was going all over the place to me. I don't know what
Yeah,
other people
a
were
little bit of
seeing.
southwest here, but a lot of it, here's some in the west. And of course, this is only because these are new wells. That's where they show up. But even within those, they're still going up. And here to the north in the Evergreen area. Interestingly, not so much in the E unit, because they did some remediation at Maple Road and at Wagner Road. So eventually these will probably go down too, because the dioxane is going somewhere. They're certainly not purging it all, because some of it's escaping out. So we don't know what's going to happen to the dioxane that's at some of these higher concentrations here, where it's going to end up. Here's for DuPont Circle. You know, it peaked around 2015, and now it's dropping back down. So there's a slug of dioxane that's moving through there. And as I said in a prior meeting, that's a concern, because this well the screened elevation of this may be as much as 15 feet below the 3 wells that are supposed to monitor what's going on in the area. So that's a kind of a quick update of that part of it. I do have another layer that I created earlier this year that I'm going to turn on here. And this is the 1995 database. These are the wells. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this mix so they don't too much information on the screen gets confusing. So the 1995 database had a lot of readings, not all of which are in the current database. So here are the readings from the 1995 database. And again, you can see if any of those areas are areas that are not reflected in the current database. Some of these are significant. If you look at Ferry Street, 3432 Ferry. This is what the company has said are the samples for 3432 Ferry Street. One sample, the maximum, well, there's probably more than one, but the maximum at 2001 was 3,800 parts per billion. Now, but if you look at the 95 database for that same location, here's what the samples are. A lot more samples, and the later ones were a lot higher. So that dioxane went somewhere. You notice the other thing here, there's a note here that says this well depth is approximate, there's no borehole log. Well, the gamma went down to like 120 feet. So there's some estimate of what the depth of this is. But this is probably what led to this mass of dioxin here, in this purplish area that's headed to MW 77 and to DuPont Circle. And maybe going beyond that as it makes its way up to these last monitoring wells at the edge of the prohibition zone, which are just now starting to get constant hits. And even to the northwest a little bit, where they're constantly around 2 parts per billion. Or maybe some of this dioxin is making its way east. And here's one of the ones that Dan referred to, I think, or alluded to, MW 130I had its first ever hit a few years ago, and it's continuing to rise. It's up to 4 parts per billion as of 2017. Where's that coming from? Well, it's probably coming from back here somewhere, because these are going up. So again, these are the white circles that you saw earlier. Do the shallow one here. So really high concentrations escaping out of here. And pretty much, again, all of these northern ones have some increase going on. So in the coming decades, how long is it going to take to go beyond the prohibition zone, and do we have enough wells to know if it's going to escape there? At the right elevations. Here's a place that there's a pointed out before. There's this MW 123 S and D are just 2 of the 4 or 5 water-bearing layers in that area, and there's a intermediate layer that's the same elevation as this guy that's now showing 4 parts per billion. That wasn't screened. There was no screen at MW 123I, and there should have been. And you probably should go back and put one in. In fact, you probably should put a D2 into this. Somehow the company can't put more than 3 screened areas in a location. They can only get S, I, and D, even though there might be 4 or 5 different water-bearing layers in that location. Those wells, those screened aquifers, those aquifers exist, and there's probably township wells that use some of those, especially over here to the west. There's a lot of township wells. These are the properties that have wells or could have wells in Scioto, and then there's a similar number for Ann Arbor. So
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that have wells that could have wells?
Right. Well, if you have a vacant parcel and you want to build a home on it, you might have to have a well.
Especially in areas where there's no municipal service.
Right. Exactly. Some of these you can tell they're vacant parcels because they show up within the city limits. So those were already parcels that are vacant, so they remain township islands. But there's just a handful of those here and there. But out here, there's a lot of properties that have wells. Now it turns out, if we go back to the 1995 data and click on these other 2 layers, these are the 1995 data for which the readings were less than the 2016 database. So there's another bunch that show up. And there's also this layer where there were non-detect back in 95, because back then, they wanted to have a pretty good idea of where all of these, where the dioxin might be. So these are all the non-detect readings from 1995 database. Well, that's pretty good information, because that means there's baseline data that's available in electronic form to show that dioxin wasn't there. So in 50 years from now, if dioxin shows up there, we now have information that shows that it wasn't there before. And in fact, you might be able to see a pattern of where it goes through. So I'm not saying we need to sample all these, I'm just saying don't throw this data away. This data should be part of the database. It can help reduce the uncertainty that people have in the community. This was what the DNR did back in the day. Most of these samples were done by the state. It's the state's own sampling. Now, why is it in the 1995 database? Because Gelman took the state sample and put it in their database. That doesn't happen anymore. Dan has to spend his time, our taxpayer money, to take the state sample and hand enter it into the official database. That's just crazy. We have precedent for how to do this. There was a much better database back then than it is now, in terms of how it was maintained and even how they named the fields, how they named the wells and things like that. Like they used a 3-digit with leading zeros, so when you sorted things, MW99 was right before MW100. Now if you look at the database, MW100 is right there after MW10, or right before MW10. You know, it's crazy. But anyway, we're devolving in terms of handling data from what we used to do.
Why did it change?
The company decided they didn't want to share data electronically. We had to cajole them into sharing the data. At least 2 or 3 times when they cut off the data, and then we convinced them to share it again. And now
So to be clear, we
get a monthly sample that Dan has to spend, again, taxpayer money for, to merge into a flawed version of 2000 of the Gelman database to create what's supposed to be the official database.
And yet they do give us a spreadsheet, so we do get their data in electronic format. Yeah, I'm not trying to.
But we don't have this data.
I'm just trying to
we don't
make
even
it clear
have
to people that we do get electronic data from Gelman. And you're right, Dan has to spend some time incorporating that into this access database.
That's right. And he has to spend time incorporating the DEQ's own data into the access database, where there could be a procedure to do that. You know, as a taxpayer and as a data processing guy, I said there's a better way to do it. Better use of Dan's time. You know, you should be checking the data, not entering the data. You should be comparing what he has versus what the company has. I'm not saying you wouldn't still do that, but at least then you have, it's like in bookkeeping, you have double entry accounting, so you can check one set of data versus another. And now we're doing single entry accounting.
I just needed Kathy to understand that we do get electronic data from Gelman, as do others. That was my only point.
But they're making decisions without all the data because they don't have the state's data. At least we don't think they do. They're not incorporating the state's data. Here, back in this 1995, They had the state's data in their database because they put it in there. So they had more information to work with than what's occurring now, and than they would have without the state's data. You know what I'm saying? The more data, the better decisions you can make.
These are all important points, but let me just point out, we got 25 minutes left.
Yeah, I wanted to make that point because
a lot to go
it's
through.
graphically you can see this. You can see that we're just, it's important not to throw away good data,
Yeah,
especially for the
Dan, you know, I'm pretty sure Dan's not throwing away any data. And the decisions that Gelman makes are not made in the vacuum. The state reviews and approves changes and going forward, and Dan and Kevin meet with, you know, we used to have a technical work group. Now it, you know, it seems like those discussions get had here in the bigger card meeting. Yet I know that those discussions are ongoing, so you know, Gelman doesn't make decisions in a vacuum, and we're involved in that, and we're not throwing away data.
Okay. One other point I want to make on that, point 4. There was a 4.4 parts per billion found in the west side, Allen Creek. And I think that was something that we touched on before, and maybe we should postpone that for the next time when everybody's here to talk about that.
Well, I'll just say briefly, we're gonna, as Dan outlined earlier in his 2018 summary of activities we're gonna undertake in 2018, it includes additional sampling, and Dan is working with the County Water Resources Commission to have a meeting before the end of February to further discuss strategy for additional sampling in light of that 4.4 in Allen Creek. Dan did mention that we sampled other parts of Allen Creek previously and it was non-detect. We found this 4.4 hit in December. So, you know, we expect to do some more sampling. We expect to work with the county and the city if we can get them together at the table, which I expect we will, and narrow in on what those data might mean.
Okay, point number 5, I'm just going to go through these real quick. The EPA site assessment mentioned some study that was done by the EPA back in '86, and based on the available data they had then, their consultant said there's going to be 10,000 to 40,000 pounds of dioxin, maybe as much as 40,000 pounds of dioxin in the groundwater. So that's the level of data that they had. He was thinking more like 10,000, but maybe not as much as 40,000. We've already removed over 113,000 pounds of dioxin. So that estimate was really low, really off. And it turns out this has been a continuing problem where because we don't have enough data, there's been continually lowball estimates of how much dioxin is there. The scope of the problem has been downplayed. And when the company did their own analysis back in 1989 and 90, they said there were 64,000 pounds. And then they had to be updated to like 80,000 pounds just before they discovered the E unit. So this whole area over here, east of Wagner, and the deeper part of it, has not been estimated. We don't know how much dioxin is there. Neither do we know how much dioxin is left at the core that makes those very high rates. So I'm going to reiterate that I think that would be a good thing to do annually, to know where they're doing a good job in the cleanup and where they're not. Because they didn't, sure they're going to be wrong, but at least you can refine the model from year to year and say, well, you were really wrong here, but you were right here. So let's concentrate on the place you were really wrong. There's also a point I noticed in the EPA documents, and there was a trove of good information in there. There was one reference to Len Lipinski did some soil sampling, and he happened to go out and do some soil sampling in front of building 1, right here. And he found out later that that was a former, no longer used septic field. And it was 31 parts per billion in an area that was a septic field. This area was not part of the spray irrigation. Septic field would not have been processed water. It shouldn't have been. So how did 31 parts per billion get in front of the building? I'll just leave everybody to contemplate how that happened. And why is it there was no follow-up on that? Now, it could be they just dumped it down the drain. It could be that people were drinking it and peeing it out and got in the septic tank that way. It could have been processed water that was erroneously dumped into the septic field. What I'd like everybody here is if they have any information about septic fields, like this is not one that we have known about. There should have been a permit way back when.
No, I think that went in about 5 years before our modern permitting process started. if I
So
remember correctly.
there was no record of earlier septic fields, right? What about when a septic field got moved? Was there any analysis of the old septic field? What about if they
Roger,
remove
do you know if-
soil from the septic field?
Is this the area that Rita and Vince have mentioned about the guy who was instructed to dump buckets?
That would have been in the back of the.
That was in the back, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is in the front of the building. They're certainly not going out front, but at least the hose not. Now, it could be that the spray irrigation wafted over and landed on the soil like it did across the street. But that's a non-amateur question. How do you get 31 parts per billion of dioxin in 1987 in the front of the building? Soil sampling. Again, we don't have the soil sample in the current doing, but we do know there are a lot of soil samples. And what we strive to do is put all the soil samples on a map so we can see where they've done soil sampling, where they have, including this parcel splits in the last couple of years. When there are soils removed, does anybody have any record of when that was done, how much soil was taken out? Where went to? Did it get put as clean fill in somebody's new basement area? Was it spread on farmers' fields? Was it the one indication I had was that one of the times they took soil out, they took it to the Wayne landfill.
The current practice is if you're removing contaminated soils, it's going to be landfilled, and it has to be tested to see what class of landfill it can go into.
So if we knew when these soils were removed, we could know whether there was that kind of rule in place. And supposedly these were licensed haulers. So maybe there might even be records of this somewhere that we can track down. Because these were really high concentrations, because even after they took out soils supposedly twice, there was 1 million or 2 million parts per billion in some of the soils left, the soils that was left, so implying that some of the soils that went away could have even been higher than that. So where did that soil end up, and is it possible that that's a continuing source that hasn't been detected yet? So anybody at the table here that can track that down, any information about that would be most useful. The last thing on that point is I've started to make a list of documents that should be in the EPA PA attachments. And there's several documents that came through the repository from the DEQ that are not in, that apparently weren't considered even given or found by the EPA. So I'm compiling a list of those things. That includes the 1994 CDM review of the site. And there they were estimating that they referred to an earlier DEQ estimate, some study that somebody did, or the company did, that was 32,000 pounds left, and the 18,000 pounds of that had been removed and put down a deep well, the deep well. So that's a document I can share with anybody that wants it. A list of the documents that should be considered by the EPA in their attachments. And that's pretty much, I have what I was going to talk about. Vince was going to talk about the .6. So if anybody wants to weigh in on that, that's again the near surface groundwater sampling. Are you still on the line, Dan?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard any of that.
Can I make a quick point back on at the end of 5, please, Roger?
Yep.
So, just for the record, I wanted to take this opportunity. I did see some emails earlier this quarter, basically accusing the DEQ of withholding information from the EPA, and I wanted to take this opportunity to set the record straight that in no way, shape, or form did we withhold anything from EPA as they were going about evaluating the petition for the preliminary assessment. We made our files available to EPA, and I think it's important to remember what the purpose of that EPA record review was in relation to the petition. It was to see, and obviously I encourage you to check with Michael Burkhoff and company, but the purpose was to determine whether there was sufficient information to score the site and make it eligible for listing on the national priorities list. The way I read EPA's preliminary assessment is they did determine it was scorable. So
Okay,
they got
that's good to
sufficient
set that record
information
straight, because
to
one
make.
of the points was that, and again, it was a consultant hired by the EPA to write up this one report. And there was something that caught my eye in there that, the maximum concentration in the groundwater was like 2,000 or 3,000 parts per billion. When we know, even like now, there's 19,000 parts per billion in MW5D. So that was a mystery to me. How could the consultant be so wrong?
Well, if the consultant was wrong about anything, DEQ was not trying, nor did in any way, shape, or form did we withhold any information. We've been transparent with them, with the community. We got all kinds of stuff posted on our website. We do it as close to real time as possible. Witness the transmittal.
And that might have been the meeting with Paul that they got that idea. They supposedly had a presentation by Paul Corporation.
I appreciate. It sounds like you, Roger, are not accusing DEQ of withholding information. If you are, I take issue with it.
If you withheld information, I'm sure it was incidental and inadvertent.
And let me just
That
say
you might not even know the information you have.
Yeah, from our standpoint, it was, I was surprised that it was a consultant that had done the report for EPA, and we were noting that there was a lot of information that we had turned over to DEQ that wasn't referenced in there, and they were saying there were no community concerns. We were not stating that you guys deep sixed it in any way. It's that information we provided was community information. It was perplexing, to say the least, that there was nothing in there about community concerns.
Well, I'll go back and reread it, but I remember some worse the effect of intentionally withholding information. That's certainly how it came across, and I just wanted to set the record
I'd be
straight.
interested in seeing that reference. And if it's a mistake on our part, we'll correct it.
Okay, we would. Thank you. Yep.
So, anything else going forward?
Are we making up early?
Not very.
Shauna, Roger wasn't paying attention to the clock, I think he just blew it.
I spoke to somebody tonight, the meeting has not been adjourned yet.
We're not gonna adjourn because I wanna go around the room and, because there's some people that never speak up very much. So I wanna have input from people that haven't spoken yet. So would you like to?
What am I speaking about?
Whatever your concern, if you have anything, any comments on today's meeting, any questions, any observations?
Only that we're glad that James Jamore, I'm vice chair of the Sierra Club Valley Group. I'm glad that the EPA is involved in the process, and hope that there will continue to be progress.
How about U of M? You got any
I said my
observations?
piece. We'll give you that report as soon as we finalize it.
Okay. Bryce?
A general term, so either being part of sometimes communications or watching communications. There is a good flow of information back and forth. I'm comfortable with that. More importantly than the information sometimes going back and forth are all the access points available, and I try to keep in contact with everyone. And I don't hear any negative side of that. So thank everybody in the room who's part of that. SILE continues to support we're our feet are in two different canoes in this one, the petition and as an intervener. It's only going to work if we just keep talking, communicating. If you're interested, this is a pitch. We just put our newsletter online under SILE's website, and Trustee Knoll here wrote a terrific piece on Gelman, not only explaining a bit of the history, but the townships and other partners' commitment to this. So please, if you are interested, read it, pass it out to others.
By the way, for quick links to any of the major stockholders, the local government stockholders, SRSW still has the left column here where you can go and click on any entity like Scioto Township, and then somewhere in here is a newsletter. I just do a search for it. Meanwhile, I forgot your name in the corner.
Oh, Gerald, Jerry.
Yeah, so what's this is the first time you've done at one of these meetings?
All right, so I'm gonna stand up because I talk better standing up. So my name is Gerald Tiernan. I got a bachelor's degree in geology from Eastern Michigan University. I worked in private consulting for about 8 years doing things here in Michigan. EPA has waste cleanups throughout the country. I came to DEQ about 10 years ago. I worked in what's called the Southeast Michigan District Office, the North Unit, which was Oakland, Macomb, and St. Clair. I was a project geologist there for about 4 years before I became the assistant district supervisor over Wayne County. So I spent the last 6.5, 7 years working pretty much exclusively in Wayne County, building relationships with the city of Detroit and EPA down there. I'm excited to meet all of you. I know this meeting is specifically about Gelman, but as a district supervisor, it's more than just the Gelman site. So, if anyone has any questions or concerns, I'll make a pitch. If you got underground storage tank questions, we have money for that. I'm a big proponent of that. We spent a lot of money in Wayne County. I look for those. So if there's a site that is developers walking away from, or developer has questions, or you have questions on, let us know. If there's the ability to use some funding that we have for storage tanks, we will use it.
And just if you're trying to place Jerry in the organizational structure here, he would be the new Mitch.
Yeah, I'm the new Mitch. Mitch is now my supervisor. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to take questions.
Okay. Well, do you need an update on this?
On this?
Do you need to sit down for 4 hours?
No, I don't think so.
I think that'll cover it. Well,
I'll tell you, since I started, probably at least 50% of my time has been on this, on Gelman in particular, just trying to come up to speed.
Yeah. Well, look through the SRSW website. That'll give you.
Yeah, Dan gave me you know, I have had multiple hours with Dan and Kevin going over, you know, information and stuff, so.
Yeah, and
I mean, I know Mitch isn't walking away, you know. So.
I'll to mention a minute, but yeah, if you go to, and we're gonna try to have something like this for card too, where you can go in and put in a search term and find reports, commentary, data about any particular thing. And eventually we'd like to have like a unified card site that does all this. It would link out to the things that DEQ is responsible for, link out to things that SILE is responsible for, the city is responsible for, and have everything be able to be reachable through online access. So, welcome aboard.
Yeah, my major area of expertise in consulting and stuff were dry cleaners and plating operations. Really, you know, I was most of my geology time was with identification of contamination, contaminant distribution, fate, transport modeling, and conceptual site modeling.
Good.
So that's where my strong suits are when it comes to environmental contamination.
So Mitch, who are you the old of?
The old Michael McClellan.
Okay.
So I sit next to the cube that the old Kathy Shiver used to sit in.
So is that kind of a little lateral, not quite?
It was a promotion, so I'm one of 2 field operations section managers for remediation and redevelopment division. So I've got basically the east part of the state, South Jackson, Southeast Michigan, Bay City, and Gaylord. And then my counterpart, David O'Donnell, from previously the Grand Rapids District Supervisor, covers the other districts, including UP, Cadillac, Grand Rapids, Gelman, and Lansing. And so we're spending our time on PFAS, which we talked a lot about. David's spent more time on that because of what's going on in Rockford, although I'm coming up to speed on the issues in Alpena and Grayling and thereabouts, as well as this, and I think our group here has talked a little bit about the volatilization indoor air pathway, otherwise known as vapor intrusion. We've talked and certainly worked with Kristen and Jenny and others on a couple dry cleaner sites, and Jerry and company are going to pick that up. There's all kinds of old dry cleaners, some active dry cleaners that may pose unacceptable risk.
So basically you got your work cut off for you.
We all
suddenly
do.
then nice.
Yep.
Right.
Thanks. Yep.
Yeah, well, congratulations
Thank
to
you.
both of you on your promotions. That's great.
Let's go this way, because you guys haven't said anything.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, you know, we're grateful to be able to be here and help out in any way we can. I know, Dan, you said we were going to get that report, the quarterly, at the end of the month. So we're looking forward to seeing that and touching base with Michael Burkhoff. But, you know, again, if there's any way we can help, please let us know.
Thank you.
More funding.
Working on it.
Yeah.
For community information.
We just wanted to say again, Mike Klotz, Congresswoman Dingell's Deputy District Director. Mrs. Dingell gets a continuous readout of everything that we hear in these meetings. She specifically mentioned it last week. She'll get an update today. So we just ask that you continually update us with anything that you have and keep the communication lines open.
Yeah, this would be a good time to point out that we have the regular card list that goes out to how many people?
100 something.
100 something. We decided that for some of the breaking news stuff that happens between meetings, we would have a card core email list, which means that you're involved enough to come to meetings, so therefore you might want to know about these breaking news things. And we didn't want to spam the 100 and some that are not even coming to meetings anymore. So if you're not part of the card core list, if you're not seeing that, and you want to, let one of us know, and we will put you on the card core list. And by virtue of you being at the meeting, you're eligible. Kathy?
Well, I had comments earlier.
We're at 12 o'clock. Yes, time to adjourn.
Anybody else over on this side? Mike? Well, Mike, by the way, I'm gone next month.
Okay.
You're gonna chair the meeting, right?
That's March 6th, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, shall we adjourn?
Let me throw in a comment. I'm kind of an interesting animal. I'm a Michigan undergraduate in the 60s, and after service, I became a developer in the Washington, D.C. area. At the time, they were starting Tyson and the Metro. Did a lot of work on both, but I've done treatment plants, done water plants, and the last site I did was Reagan Airport, one of the remodeling. But anyway, I'd had enough, and I sold the business when the housing crunch was coming, moved back to Ann Arbor. I have 3 daughters, and 2 of them were enrolled here, one in medical school and one as an undergraduate. And I've loved it, but I've been looking for a new challenge. And I met, once again, we've been looking for a long time, but Kevin and I are looking to develop some ground and to build a couple of few houses. But this interests and excites me, as it should anybody who lives in the area. And it needs help, and I'm kind of looking to figure out a way I can help.
Well, you got a good perspective on how we can get the information out so that people aren't panicked when something breaks, and how we can avoid panics in the future by having more due diligence and stuff.
Well, the approach here is excellent. And
it's a work in progress.
It is.
Even though it's been going on for
a lot of
13 years in this form, and another 13 or more before that in different citizen groups. And that, that whole history is something that if there's some volunteer, intern that wants to take that on to kind of document how do we get to this point? What are the community involvement, official involvements, and volunteer involvements? Because there's a story here that to let people know that, that there are solutions if you all work at it. That's what we want to do.
One thing, did Methanol give you any kind of update on the teach out? Is that what's?
The what?
The dioxine teach out?
Oh, the teach out, yeah.
I was invited to a meeting in a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not entirely sure.
I think Rita knew something about that, right?
Taking it on. I know it sounds like it was a little bit different than his original proposal. To catch you guys up, it was Matt Nod had worked with the University of Michigan to see if they could do some sort of website to give people a historical perspective so that we wouldn't have to kind of bring people up to speed, that they could kind of go and do it. And so I don't know exactly what the format of this teach out is. I think there's a couple of DEQ people involved.
Yep.
I think I was invited. I don't have a lot of background. I apologize.
When is it?
In the next week or 2 or 3?
Well, I think the meeting within the next couple of weeks is the first organizational meeting. This is, it seems to be an academic grant type of thing that Matt lined up through Rebecca Harden at the university. And so they're assembling people from various disciplines, local, state government. Roger, I presume you're involved.
Yeah, I just haven't heard anything recently about it.
So you didn't get the doodle poll for the meeting?
Guess not.
Oh, man, that's surprising, because I figured for sure you'd be on board. And my understanding is that this is, it's going to be sort of like a series of panel discussions and includes students as well. So Roger, I'll try and send you a note on that, because I didn't look at the address. I figured you were participating. So it's public education and outreach effort.
But
what I understand.
usually stuff like that comes through.
Yeah, but if it was through Doodle, that might have gotten
I don't look at I don't even clean out my space.
Oh, it's the 20th of February? Okay, the 20th of February.
20th of February, I can still do that.
So Roger, on the meeting announcement, it says that the kickoff meeting is an opportunity to begin to create a shared vision of the Teach Out event will look like. So we will discuss high-level goals, roles and responsibilities, preferred methods of communication, project milestone, and other project logistics.
And that's an email?
Well, this was the actual meeting announcement that I got. Okay. Tuesday, February 20th, 2 p.m. to 3:30.
2 to 3:30.
Yeah, 500 East Washington Street.
Okay. I will follow up on that. Thanks.
Yep.
And thanks for bringing that up.
Yes.
Right, no, and that would be a big shortcoming.
And I think that's one of the big utilities, everybody together, face to face, where if you try to do this all by email, something would get lost, like that did. All right. Shall we adjourn? I take motion.
I second that we adjourn.
Aye.
Have a good one, everybody. Stay warm.
I'll check. Dan, I'm hanging up.